The human female walked into the firing range like she owned the place, which was absolutely hilarious considering she was barely 5.5 feet tall and looked like a stiff breeze could knock her over. I am Vector Nax, Senior Weapons Instructor, at the Galactic Defense Initiative training facility on Station Kronos, and I have seen thousands of recruits from hundreds of species pass through these halls. But humans? They were new, fresh, and apparently completely insane. Her name was Riley Vance, according to my datapad, and she was lugging what appeared to be a rifle that had been assembled by a committee of drunk engineers who could not agree on anything. Seriously, the weapon looked like someone had taken 3 different guns, smashed them together, and then added random pieces just for the fun of it. There was a scope on top that was longer than my forearm, some kind of bipod that folded at weird angles, and modifications I could not even identify. By the 7 moons of Traxxas, muttered Krell, my assistant instructor, a 4-armed thoraxian who prided himself on his weapon knowledge. What in the name of sanity is that thing? The other recruits, about 40 of them from various species, turned to stare. A few of them started laughing. Not quietly either. Full-on doubled over, slapping their knees or equivalent appendages, kind of laughing. There was Jex Torin, a massive Craolor with blue-scaled skin, who thought he was the best marksman in the galaxy because he could hit a target at 300 meters with his standard-issue plasma rifle. He was laughing so hard his scales were rippling. Next to him stood 3 Vexian twins, insectoid beings with compound eyes who were chittering in their native language, which my translator helpfully informed me was various creative insults about compensating for poor aim with excessive equipment. Riley did not seem to care. She just walked past them all, her face completely neutral, and set up at lane 17, the furthest lane from everyone else. Smart girl, Instructor Nax called out Jex, still grinning like an idiot. Is that human carrying a museum piece? Or did she build that rifle from spare parts she found in a trash compactor? More laughter. Even some of the more serious recruits cracked smiles. I was about to tell them all to shut up and focus on their own weapons when Riley spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, almost bored. It is called customization. Maybe you have heard of it, or maybe you are too busy relying on your species' natural advantages to actually develop any real skill. Oh snap. The range went dead quiet. You could have heard a pin drop on the metal floor. Jex's face, or what passed for his face, went from amused to angry in about half a second. His scales flushed dark purple, which in Craolor physiology meant he was ready to fight. You want to repeat that, human? He growled, taking a step toward her. Riley turned to face him. And I have to give her credit. She did not flinch even though Jex was easily twice her size and could probably tear her in half without breaking a sweat. She just looked up at him with these cold, gray eyes and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. I said, your aim is average at best, and you hide behind the fact that your species has better depth perception and faster reflexes than most. But strip away those advantages, and you are just mediocre. That better. Quell made a whistling sound that was the thoraxian equivalent of saying, oh no, she did not. I had to suppress a laugh myself. This tiny human had just called out the biggest, loudest recruit in the entire program, and she had done it without raising her voice or showing any fear whatsoever. Enough, I barked, stepping between them before Jex did something stupid like actually attacking her. Karen, back to your lane. Vance, that goes for you too. This is a firing range, not a debate hall. You want to prove who is better? Do it with your scores. Jex glared at Riley for another few seconds, then turned and stomped back to his position. Riley just nodded at me, calm as anything, and went back to setting up her rifle. And by setting up, I mean she spent the next 10 minutes adjusting things I did not even know could be adjusted. She tweaked the scope, modified the bipod height 3 times, changed something on the stock, and even pulled out a small device to check wind conditions inside the range. Inside, where there was no wind. What was she even doing? Krell leaned over to me and whispered, should we tell her that half of what she is doing makes no sense for a standard range qualification? No, I replied quietly. Let us see where this goes. I am curious now. The qualification course was simple, at least by galactic standards. Targets at 50, 100, 200, and 400 meters, 5 shots at each distance. Hit the center mass, you get full points. Anything outside that, your score decreases. Miss entirely, you fail. Simple, clean, effective. Most recruits used standard-issue weapons. Plasma rifles, railguns, pulse carbines. Reliable technology that had been refined over centuries by the best military engineers in the galaxy. They were accurate, powerful, and idiot-proof.
Well,
Mostly idiot-proof. And then there was Riley with her Frankenstein rifle that looked like it had been cobbled together in someone's garage. We started with the 50-meter targets. Easy stuff. Even species with terrible eyesight could hit these. Jex went first because, of course he did. 5 shots. 5 perfect center mass hits. He turned and smirked at Riley, who was not even watching him. She was still making micro-adjustments to her scope. The Vexian twins went next. 15 shots total between the 3 of them because apparently they counted as one unit for some bureaucratic reason I never understood. All center mass. They chittered smugly at each other. Other recruits followed. A Felnar with orange fur who moved like liquid and shot like lightning. A cybernetic Morgeth who barely needed to aim because his targeting computer did most of the work. A human male named Derek Holt who used a standard plasma rifle and did reasonably well, hitting 4 out of 5 in center mass and 1 just barely outside. Then it was Riley's turn. She settled into position behind her rifle, and I noticed something interesting. Her breathing changed. It became slower, more measured. Her entire body seemed to relax, even though she was lying prone on the hard metal floor. She pressed her cheek against the stock of her rifle and her finger rested lightly on the trigger. "Targets active," announced the range computer in its monotone voice. "You may fire when ready." Riley waited, and waited, and waited some more. 10 seconds passed, then 20. The other recruits started murmuring. Jex made a snorting sound that might have been a laugh. "Is she sleeping?" someone asked. Then Riley fired. The sound was different from the plasma rifles and railguns. Sharper, more violent. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, but she absorbed the recoil like it was nothing, and immediately settled back into position. 1 target down. Center mass. She fired again, and again, and again, and again. 5 shots in maybe 8 seconds, and every single one hit center mass. But here is the thing that made me pay attention.
Really pay attention.
She was not just hitting center mass, she was hitting the exact same spot in center mass. All 5 rounds went through a hole you could cover with your thumb. Said Krell. "That is actually impressive. Move to 100 meters, I ordered, trying to keep the interest out of my voice. The targets shifted back. This was where things got slightly more challenging. Not much, but enough that you had to actually aim instead of just pointing in the general direction and hoping for the best. Jex went through his shots quickly. 5 hits, all center mass, but I noticed they were spread out across the target zone. Still good shooting, but not as tight as Riley's group at 50 meters. The other recruits followed. Most did well, a few missed 1 or 2 shots. Derek Holt missed 2 this time, which put a frustrated look on his face. Riley took her position again. Same routine, same breathing, same patience. She waited even longer this time, almost 30 seconds, and I swear I could hear Jex making irritated sounds behind her. Then she fired. 5 shots. Same result. 1 hole. Dead center. Okay, now people were starting to notice. The murmuring got quieter. A few of the recruits moved closer to watch her. Even Jex stopped making snide comments and just watched. 200 meters, I called out. This was where the average shooters separated from the good ones. 200 meters meant you had to account for your weapon's natural drift, your own breathing, even the slight tremor in your hands when you pulled the trigger. Most recruits could still hit center mass, but their groups opened up. Instead of 5 shots in a hand-sized area, you might see them spread across the entire center mass zone. Jex took his time at this distance. His first 3 shots were center mass. His 4th clipped the edge. His 5th missed entirely. He swore in Craolor, which sounded like gravel being crushed in a blender. 4 out of 5, I noted on my datapad. Still passing. He did not look happy about it. The Vexian twins did better. 12 out of 15 center mass. The Felnar missed 1. The Morgath's targeting computer failed on 1 shot, which made him slam his mechanical fist into the ground hard enough to dent the metal. Then Riley, same position, same breathing. But this time she took even longer to fire. A full minute passed before her first shot rang out, and when it did I zoomed in on the target display with my ocular implant because I did not believe what I was seeing. Center mass. Perfect hit. 4 more shots followed over the next 30 seconds. and when the computer calculated her group size, it came back as 0.7 inches. 0.7, at 200 meters, with a rifle that looked like it was assembled by a blind technician having a bad day. That is not possible, Krell said flatly. I have been teaching marksmanship for 15 cycles, and I have never seen a group that tight at 200 meters with any weapon, let alone whatever that thing is. Check the targeting system, I told him. Make sure she is not using any electronic assistance. Krell scanned her rifle with his analyzer. Nothing. It is all mechanical. Scope is not even electronic. It is a magnified glass lens system, like ancient technology. Chemical propellant rounds. Mechanical trigger. Instructor, that rifle is basically primitive technology, with some minor modifications. I felt my secondary heart skip a beat, which is a thing that happens when vector species get surprised. This human female was outshotting everyone in the class with a weapon that was thousands of years behind current galactic technology, and she was making it look easy. 400 meters, I announced, and I could not keep the anticipation out of my voice. Final distance. 400 meters was where even good shooters started having trouble. The targets looked small. The margin for error was tiny, and any imperfection in your technique got magnified exponentially. Most recruits were happy to get 3 out of 5 at this range. 4 was excellent. 5 was rare. Jack stepped up to the line with determination written all over his scaled face. He took his time, using every advantage his species had. Yudakai's, faster processing, natural predator instincts. His first shot hit center mass. His second clipped the edge. His third missed. His fourth missed. His fifth hit center mass again. 2 out of 5, I recorded. You passed the qualification, but barely. His scales flushed dark purple again, but this time it was embarrassment rather than anger. The other recruits went through their attempts. Results were mixed. Some got 3 hits. Some got 2. Derek Holt got 1, which technically meant he failed the qualification and would have to retake it. The Felnar got 3. The Morgath got 4, which was impressive considering his targeting computer was still glitchy. The Vexian twins huddled together, their compound eyes focused on the distant targets. They fired in sequence, a rapid-fire pattern that was almost musical. When the scoring computer tallied their results, they had gotten 7 out of 15. Not bad, but not great either. And then everyone turned to watch Riley. She had been observing each shooter carefully. I noticed, taking notes on a physical pad of paper with an actual writing implement, which was so retro it almost hurt to look at. She had watched where their shots went, how they held their weapons, how they breathed. Now she settled into position for the final time, and the entire range went silent. Even the recruits who had been talking quietly stopped. Everyone wanted to see if she could maintain her perfect score at the hardest distance. Riley's breathing slowed to the point where I thought she might have fallen asleep. Her finger rested on the trigger with the lightest possible touch. The barrel of her rifle was perfectly still, not wavering even a fraction of an inch despite the fact that she was holding it for almost 2 full minutes without firing. Then I saw it. The tiny adjustment of her shoulder, the microscopic shift of her hips, the way her hand relaxed and tensed on the grip. She was accounting for something I could not see or measure, making calculations in her head that most species would need a computer to figure out. And she fired. The shot echoed through the range. On the target display, a perfect center mass hit appeared. The computer measured it as exactly dead center, within a millimeter of the absolute middle of the target. 4 more shots followed, each one spaced about 20 seconds apart, each one placed with the same impossible precision. When the final shot rang out and the computer calculated her group size, it displayed a number that made Krella's primary and secondary eyes go wide. 0.4 inches. At 400 meters, with a mechanical rifle. That is not possible, Jack said loudly. She is cheating. There is no way a human, especially one that small, can shoot that accurately with that ridiculous weapon. She must have some kind of hidden technology. Scan her again, I ordered Krell, even though I knew what the result would be. Krell ran a full-spectrum analysis on both Riley and her rifle. Chemical residue confirmed she was using old-fashioned gunpowder cartridges. Thermal scan showed no electronic components anywhere on the weapon except for a small battery that powered a light on the side, and that was currently off. There was no targeting computer, no aim assist, no stabilization field, nothing but metal, wood, glass, and the shooter's skill. She is clean, Krell announced. Everything is manual. I walked over to Riley's lane, and she was already breaking down her rifle, separating it into components and packing them into a case with practiced efficiency. Up close, I could see the wear on the weapon. This was not some new toy she had just picked up. This rifle had been used, maintained, modified, and loved for what looked like years. "Riley Vance," I said, and she looked up at me with those cold gray eyes. "That was the most impressive shooting I have seen in 15 cycles of teaching this course. But I have to know, what is your background? Are you military trained? Special forces? Some kind of human super soldier program?" She smiled, and this time it was genuine, not the predatory grin she had given Jex earlier. "No, sir, I am from Montana." "Montana," I repeated, confused. "Is that a military installation?" "It is a state, a region on Earth. Rural area, lots of open space, mountains, wildlife. My father taught me to shoot when I was 8 years old because we had to hunt for food and protect our livestock from predators. Been shooting ever since. 22 years now." I tried to process this information. "You learned to shoot like that because you needed to hunt animals?" "Yes, sir. And because it is fun. There are competitions. Long-range shooting is a popular sport where I come from. Some people play ball games. I shoot targets at extreme distances. This rifle here?" She patted the case affectionately. "I built it myself from parts I bought and modified. Took me 3 years to get it exactly right. The scope is from a manufacturer called Schmidt and Bender. The barrel is custom made by a gunsmith in Wyoming. The stock I carved myself from walnut wood. The trigger mechanism I modified to have a 2-pound pull weight with 0 creep. Every part serves a purpose, and I know this weapon better than I know my own heartbeat." Prelate had joined us and was listening with all 4 of his ears perked up. "But why make it so complicated? Why not just use a standard weapon?" Riley's smile got wider. "Because standard is boring, and boring does not win competitions. Every shooter is different. Different body proportions, different breathing patterns, different eye dominance, different preferences. A truly great shooter does not adapt to their weapon. They adapt their weapon to themselves. This rifle fits me perfectly because I made it to fit me perfectly. That is why I can shoot like this. It is not just skill. It is harmony between shooter and weapon. Only snipers do that," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. "Only elite snipers take that much time and care with their weapons. You are not just a good shot. You are trained specifically in long-range precision shooting." Riley shrugged. "I mean, I would not call myself elite, but I did place 3rd in the Precision Rifle Series National Championship 2 years ago and 5th at the International Long-Range Shooting Competition in France last year. So I guess I am okay at it." Okay at it. This human had just outshot every recruit in the class by a margin that was frankly embarrassing. And she described herself as okay at it. That was the most human thing I had heard all day. Jex had walked over, his pride clearly wounded but his curiosity apparently stronger. "How far can you shoot with that thing?" "Farthest confirmed hit I have made is 2,100 meters, Riley said casually, though that was in perfect conditions with wind-reading equipment and a spotter helping me calculate adjustments. In combat conditions with just me and the rifle, probably max effective range is around 1,200 meters for a human-sized target." 1,200 meters? Jex's voice cracked slightly. That is farther than most of our sniper teams can engage with their plasma rifles. Plasma dissipates over distance and is affected by atmospheric conditions. Riley explained like she was teaching a class. Chemical propellant rounds are ballistic. They are affected by gravity, wind, and air resistance, but they do not lose energy the same way plasma does. Plus, there is no electronic signature, no notes bloom, no warning before the shot arrives. By the time the target hears the sound, the round is already there. That is why my people still use these weapons for precision shooting even though we have more advanced technology available. I was starting to understand why humans had such a terrifying reputation in ground combat despite being relatively new to the galactic stage. It was not that they were stronger or faster or tougher than other species, though they were surprisingly resilient. It was that they approached warfare with a level of dedication and creativity that bordered on insanity. They took primitive technology and refined it to levels of effectiveness that exceeded more advanced weapons in specific applications. They spent years mastering individual skills instead of relying on technology to compensate for their limitations. And they seemed to genuinely enjoy the challenge of becoming better, even when better meant spending 3 years building a custom rifle from scratch. "All right, everyone," I called out to the assembled recruits. "Qualification scores are being recorded now. Dance, you scored perfect marks at all distances with the tightest groups I have ever seen in this facility. Congratulations. You are officially the top shooter in your class." There was no applause. Just stunned silence as the reality sank in that this small human with her weird rifle had destroyed everyone's expectations and made some of the class's biggest egos look foolish in the process. "However," I continued, "this is just marksmanship qualification. Tomorrow we start combat scenarios, tactical movement, and team coordination exercises. Being a great shot matters, but it does not mean much if you cannot work with your squad or adapt to changing battlefield conditions. So do not get too comfortable with your current rankings. They will change." Riley just nodded and finished packing up her rifle. As the other recruits filed out, some of them muttering, some looking thoughtful, some probably plotting ways to beat her score, I noticed that Jex walked past Riley and stopped. "That was impressive shooting," he admitted grudgingly. "I apologize for mocking your rifle. Clearly you know what you are doing." Riley looked up at him and extended her hand in the human greeting gesture. "Apology accepted. And for what it is worth, your shooting at 50 and 100 meters was solid. You just need to work on breath control at longer distances. You are tensing up and anticipating the shot." Jex looked surprised that she was offering advice, but he nodded. "I will keep that in mind. Perhaps you could show me some techniques." "Sure," Riley said with a genuine smile. "I am always happy to talk about shooting. It is kind of my thing." They walked out together, the massive blue-scaled Creolor and the tiny human female, talking about trigger control and breathing patterns like old friends. Greller watched them go and then turned to me. "Instructor Nax, I have been wrong about many things in my life. But I think I was especially wrong about humans. I thought they would be the weak link in this class." "So did I admitted. "But I am learning that humans have a saying that applies here. Never judge a book by its cover, or in this case, never judge a shooter by their rifle, no matter how strange it looks." "What do you think will happen in the combat scenarios tomorrow?" Krell asked. I thought about Riley's cold, calculating eyes, the way she had studied each shooter carefully, the patience she had shown before each shot, the complete lack of fear when confronting Jex, who could have easily hurt her. "I think," I said slowly, "that the other recruits are in for another unpleasant surprise. Because if she shoots like a sniper, thinks like a sniper and prepares like a sniper, then she probably fights like a sniper too, and snipers are patient, methodical and absolutely ruthless when they have a target. Should we warn the others?" Krell asked with a clicking laugh. "No," I replied, pulling up tomorrow's training schedule on my datapad. "Let them figure it out on their own. Sometimes the best lessons are the ones that surprise you. Besides, a little humility might do some of these recruits good. Especially Torrent." As I reviewed the schedule, I made a mental note to observer Riley extra carefully during the combat scenarios. Something told me that her performance today was just the beginning, and that this human was going to continue defying expectations in ways that would make my job very interesting. I had been teaching weapons and tactics for 15 cycles, and I thought I had seen everything. Turns out I had never seen a human sniper with a custom rifle and a point to prove. Tomorrow was going to be very educational for everyone. The next morning came too early, as mornings on Station Kronos always did. The artificial lighting cycled to simulate dawn, which was supposed to help with circadian rhythms, but mostly just annoyed everyone who had to wake up at 600 hours for combat training. I arrived at the tactical training arena 30 minutes before the recruits were scheduled to show up because I wanted to review the course setup with Krell and make sure everything was properly configured. The arena was a massive space, roughly the size of 3 human football fields according to my research on Earth sports, with configurable terrain, holographic enemies, and real-time threat simulation systems. Today's exercise was called Urban Warfare Scenario 12, which was a fancy way of saying we were going to drop the recruits into a simulated city environment and make them clear buildings while enemy forces tried to kill them. Well, simulated killing. The weapons fired marker rounds that registered on body sensors, and the holographic enemies could shoot back with simulated energy bursts that would disable your sensor suit if they hit you. Get hit 3 times, and you were considered dead. Your suit locked up and you had to sit there feeling stupid while your teammates either rescued you or left you behind. I have configured the scenario for maximum difficulty. Krell announced proudly as I walked up to the control station. 30 enemy combatants spread across 4 buildings, mixed weapon types, randomized patrol patterns, and I added civilians this time, so the recruits cannot just shoot everything that moves. Civilians! I raised one of my eye ridges. Are you trying to give them a nervous breakdown on day 2? You said humility might do them good, Krell reminded me with a clicking laugh. Besides, if they cannot tell the difference between a hostile and a civilian in a controlled training environment, they have no business being on a real battlefield. He had a point, a brutal, sadistic point, but a point nonetheless. The recruits started arriving in groups. I watched them on the monitors as they entered the prep area and began suiting up in their tactical gear. Jex was already barking orders at the other Krathziller in his squad, organizing them like he was some kind of natural-born leader. The Vethian twins moved as a unit like always, their movements perfectly synchronized. Derek Holt and the other humans in the class clustered together, checking weapons and looking nervous. And then there was Riley. She arrived alone, carrying her rifle case and a tactical pack that looked like it weighed almost as much as she did. While the other recruits were rushing around and making noise, she calmly found a corner, opened her case, and began a detailed inspection of her weapon. Every part got checked, every surface got wiped down. She cycled the action multiple times, checked the magazine seating, and looked through her scope to verify the reticle was still properly aligned. She treats that rifle like it is alive, Krell observed. Maybe for her it is, I replied. Some shooters form that kind of bond with their weapons. It becomes an extension of themselves. Once Riley was satisfied with her rifle, she started on her gear, checked her radio, adjusted her vest, made sure every piece of equipment was exactly where she wanted it. The whole process took her 20 minutes, and she never once looked rushed or stressed. Just methodical, calm, professional. All right, everyone, I announced over the intercom. You have 5 minutes to finish your preparations and move to the staging area. This is a squad-based exercise, which means you will be divided into 4 teams of 10. Your objective is to clear all 4 buildings and neutralize all hostile forces while avoiding civilian casualties. Communication between squads is allowed. Tactical coordination is encouraged. Unnecessary heroics will get you killed. Any questions? Jax raised one of his massive hands. What about the sniper? Everyone turned to look at Riley, who was slinging her rifle across her back and adjusting the straps. What about her? I asked. Well, she has a long-range weapon, Jex said, and I was pleased to note his tone was respectful rather than mocking this time. Does she get assigned to a squad or does she shet independently as fire support? That was actually a good tactical question. In real military operations, snipers often worked in pairs separate from the main assault force, providing overwatch and taking out high-value targets. But this was a training exercise designed for squad cohesion. I looked at Riley. Vance, your preference? She thought about it for a moment. I can work with a squad, sir. I have done close-quarters combat training, but if I am being honest, I would be more effective at range providing overwatch and target elimination for multiple squads. Then that is what you will do, I decided. Squads Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta will handle building clearing. Vance, you will position yourself somewhere with good lines of sight and provide support as needed. Your job is to keep enemy forces from flanking the assault teams and to eliminate any high-priority targets you identify. Clear? Crystal clear, sir, Riley said with a small smile. The other recruits looked uncertain about this arrangement. Having a sniper in the exercise added a new dynamic they probably had not trained for. But that was the point. Real combat was unpredictable, and they needed to learn how to adapt.
I assigned the squads.
Jex ended up as squad leader for Alpha Team, which made sense given his leadership tendencies and the fact that he was loud enough to be heard over gunfire. The Vexian twins were split up, 1 going to Bravo and 2 going to Charlie, which annoyed them but was necessary for balance. Derek Holt got assigned to Delta Squad as a rifleman. You have 10 minutes to plan your approach, I announced. Use that time wisely. Exercise begins when you enter the arena. Good hunting. The squads huddled up immediately, squad leaders pulling out tactical pads and sketching out assault plans. I watched Riley carefully to see what she would do. She did not join any of the huddles. Instead, she pulled out her own pad, called up a 3-dimensional map of the arena layout, and started studying it with intense focus. She zoomed in on different sections, rotated the view, made notes on her physical notepad with that ancient writing implement. After about 6 minutes, she walked over to where the squad leaders were talking. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I have identified 3 positions that will give me overlapping fields of fire across all 4 buildings. Position 1 is the water tower on the north side, gives me coverage of buildings A and B. Position 2 is the parking garage roof, covers buildings C and D. Position 3 is the communications tower if I need elevation for problem solving." Jax looked at her map display and nodded slowly. "That could work. How fast can you move between positions?" 2 minutes if I am moving tactically and safely. 90 seconds if things get desperate and I am willing to take risks," Riley replied. "What is your effective engagement range with that weapon?" asked the squad leader of Bravo Team, a cybernetic Morgoth named Vex Carr. "Inside this arena, everything is within effective range. The farthest shot would be maybe 450 meters from the water tower to the far corner of Building D. That is easy." "Easy," she said, 450 meters, like she was discussing a walk to the cafeteria. "All right," Jax said, taking charge of the coordination. "Vance provides overwatch from Position 1 while Alpha and Bravo clear buildings A and B. Once those are secure, she moves to Position 2 and covers Charlie and Delta for buildings C and D. If any squad runs into heavy resistance, call out on the radio and she prioritizes that location." "Everyone good with that plan?" The other squad leaders nodded. Riley gave a thumbs up, which was apparently a human gesture meaning affirmative. "One more thing," Riley added. "I will call out enemy positions as I see them. If I say there is a hostile in a specific location, trust that information. I will not take the shot if there is any chance of hitting friendlies, but I need you all to be aware of where I am aiming in case you need to use that information for your own movements." "Agreed," Jax said. Then he looked around at all the assembled recruits. "Listen up. This exercise is about teamwork. Individual glory means nothing if the mission fails. Watch your sectors, communicate constantly, and do not do anything stupid. We clear these buildings methodically and safely." "Got it?" A chorus of acknowledgments came back. I had to admit Jax was actually pretty good at this leadership thing when he was not being an arrogant fool. "Time is up," I announced. "All personnel move to starting positions. Exercise begins in 60 seconds. The squads moved into the arena through different entry points, spreading out to their assigned start positions. Riley went straight for the water tower, moving fast but not running, her rifle held in a ready position across her chest. By the time the exercise timer hit 0, she was already halfway up the tower ladder. "Exercise is live," Krell announced over the speakers. "All weapons hot. All enemy forces active. Good luck." I pulled up multiple camera feeds on my monitor so I could watch different areas simultaneously. Alpha Squad was advancing on Building A from the east. Bravo was approaching Building B from the south. Charlie and Delta were holding back at their start positions, waiting for the first 2 buildings to be cleared before they advanced, and Riley had reached the top of the water tower. I zoomed in on her position. She had set up on the platform with her rifle resting on the metal railing, the bipod deployed for stability. She was scanning through her scope, methodically checking every window, every door, every possible position where an enemy could be lurking. "Alpha 6 to Overwatch." Jax's voice crackled over the radio. "We are at the entrance to Building A, preparing to breach." "Overwatch to Alpha 6, Riley responded, and her voice was completely different from how she normally spoke, clipped, professional, all business. "I have eyes on your position. North side, 2nd floor, 3 hostiles. East side, ground floor, 2 hostiles. I can take the 2nd floor targets when you breach. Your call." There was a pause while Jax processed that information. "Can you confirm they are hostiles and not civilians?" "Confirmed. All 5 are carrying weapons and wearing combat gear. No civilian signatures." "Roger that. Overwatch. Take the 2nd floor targets on my mark. Alpha Team, prepare for dynamic entry. Bravo Team, hold position until Building A is secure." Alpha Squad stacked up at the door. 4 Kraelar warriors, 1 Felnar, 3 humans and 2 species I did not immediately recognize. They looked ready, weapons up, body positions correct, breathing control. 3, 2, 1. "Mark," Jax called out. Riley fired. The sound of her rifle was distinct even over the radio. Sharp, loud, final. On my monitor, I watched as 3 holographic enemies on the 2nd floor of Building A flickered and disappeared, their simulation projectors registering fatal hits before they could even react to the assault team's breach. Alpha Squad crashed through the door with textbook precision. They cleared the ground floor in under 30 seconds, neutralizing the 2 hostiles Riley had identified plus 2 more that had been hidden from her angle. No casualties. Perfect execution. Building a ground floor secure, Jex reported. Moving to second floor. Overwatch to Alpha 6. Second floor is clear of hostiles, but be advised, I count 4 civilian signatures in the northeast corner room. Blue door with broken window. Roger. Alpha 4 and 5 secure those civilians and get them evacuated. I watched as 2 members of Alpha Squad split off and carefully entered the room Riley had identified. Sure enough, 4 holographic civilians were cowering in the corner, their projections showing fear responses. The soldiers got them moving toward the exit without incident. Meanwhile, Bravo Squad had breached Building B and was running into heavier resistance. They had walked into an ambush, with hostiles on multiple floors firing down at them. 2 members of Bravo were already showing red indicators on my monitor, meaning they had been hit enough times to be considered casualties. Bravo 2 to all units, we are taking heavy fire in Building B, the squad leader called out. His voice was strained. Multiple hostiles, upper floors, we need support. Overwatch to Bravo 2, I am engaging now. Keep your people below the second floor windows. Riley adjusted her position, shifting her aim to Building B. I watched through the scope camera feed that Krell had cleverly added to the monitoring system. The magnification was incredible. I could see individual holographic enemies moving through windows and around corners like she was standing right next to them instead of 200 meters away. She fired. 1 hostile down. Adjusted. Fired again. Second hostile down. A third enemy popped up in a window and Riley's shot took him out before he could even aim his weapon. 4th target. 5th target. She was working through them like she was checking items off a shopping list. Calm. Efficient. Ruthless. Bravo 2 to Overwatch, you are a God's damned artist. Hostiles are suppressed. We are advancing. Overwatch to Bravo 2, 3 more on the top floor. East side. I cannot get an angle on them from here. You will need to clear them manually. Roger that. Bravo team, up the stairs, move. While Bravo finished clearing Building B, Alpha had completed Building A and was evacuating 6 civilians total. No casualties on the assault team, 14 hostiles neutralized, 7 of them by Riley before Alpha ever entered the building. This is remarkable, Krell said, watching the same feeds I was. She is eliminating threats faster than the assault teams can advance. At this rate, the exercise will be over in half the projected time. Charlie and Delta, move on Building C and D, I ordered. Overwatch. Reposition to cover their advance. Roger. Moving now. Riley broke down her position with practice speed. Rifle across her back, gear secured, and she was down the ladder in seconds. I timed her movement to the parking garage, exactly 2 minutes and 10 seconds, which was actually slower than her estimate, but she was moving carefully and checking corners as she went. Smart. She reached the parking garage roof and immediately set up in a new position. This time she chose a spot with concrete barriers that would provide cover if anyone shot back at her, which showed good tactical thinking. Overwatch in position 2. I have eyes on Building C and D. Charlie team, you have 4 hostiles on your approach vector. Ground level behind the large transport vehicle. Charlie actual to Overwatch, can you engage? Negative. Civilian is in the structure directly behind them. Ricochet risk is too high. Recommend you use the alley approach and flank from the west. Copy that. Charlie team, adjust approach. The exercise continued for another 20 minutes, and it was like watching a tactical clinic. Riley coordinated with all 4 squads, calling out enemy positions, eliminating high-priority targets, and warning them about civilians. Her accuracy was perfect. Every shot she took resulted in a confirmed elimination. 0 friendly fire incidents. 0 civilian casualties. The assault teams were adapting to her presence too. They started moving more aggressively because they trusted that she would cover them. When Delta Squad got pinned down by a heavy weapons team, Riley took out the gunner with a shot through a window that could not have been more than 18 inches wide. The squad immediately pushed forward and cleared the room. By the time the exercise ended, all 4 buildings were secure. 30 hostile forces neutralized. 12 civilians evacuated safely, and casualties. Alpha had 0. Bravo had 2 wounded who had been evacuated. Charlie had 1 wounded. Delta had 0. In a normal run of this scenario, I expected to see at least 15 casualties and usually 2 or 3 dead. The assault teams had performed exceptionally well, but a huge part of their success was Riley eliminating threats before they could do serious damage. "Exercise complete," I announced. "All personnel return to the briefing area. Stand down from combat status." The recruits filtered back in groups, chattering excitedly about the exercise. Even the ones who had been marked as casualties were in good spirits, because the overall mission had been such a success. Jex was slapping people on the back and congratulating his team. The Vexian twins were chittering happily to each other. Riley was the last one to arrive, walking in calmly with her rifle secured and her gear neatly organized. She did not look excited or proud. She just looked like she had done her job and was ready for the next task. "All right, everyone, gather around," I called out. "Let us review the exercise performance." I pulled up the statistics on the main display. Mission completion time, casualty rates, accuracy percentages, civilian safety scores. The numbers were impressive across the board. "You all performed well today," I began. "Squad leaders showed good tactical thinking. Assault teams communicated effectively and adapted to changing situations. Overall mission success rate is 97%, which is excellent for your second day of training. However," I continued, and everyone got quiet because they knew a however meant criticism was coming. "Let us talk about what really made this exercise successful. Vance, step forward, please." Riley walked to the front, looking confused about why I was singling her out. "Vance eliminated 17 hostile targets during this exercise," I said, pulling up her individual statistics. "That is more than any single squad achieved. Her accuracy was 100%. She provided real-time intelligence to all 4 squads. She prevented at least 6 casualties based on my analysis of threat vectors. And she did all of this while operating alone, without direct support, and while managing her own tactical movement between positions." I turned to face the assembled recruits. "This is what a specialist looks like. Someone who has spent years mastering a specific skill set and knows how to apply it in a tactical environment. Some of you mocked her rifle yesterday. Some of you thought she would be a liability. Instead, she was the most effective single operator in the entire exercise." Jex stepped forward, and for a moment I thought he was going to argue. But instead, he looked at Riley and nodded with respect. "Instructor Nax is right. Overwatch saved our lives multiple times today. I counted at least 3 times when hostiles had angles on my team that we did not see, and she eliminated them before they could fire. That is skill. That is professionalism. And frankly, that is something I need to learn from." He extended his hand again, and Riley shook it. This time the gesture looked less like acceptance and more like genuine respect between warriors. "I have a question," Derek Holt spoke up. "Vance, how did you learn to coordinate with multiple teams like that? The communication side of it. That seemed almost as important as the shooting." Riley thought about her answer carefully. "Practice, mostly. I have done competition shooting where you have to move between stages and communicate with range officers. But more importantly, I listen. When someone calls for help, I prioritize. When someone gives information, I process it, and I never assume I know everything. If a squad leader tells me they see something I do not, I trust that information until proven otherwise." "That is the key word," I interjected. "Trust. In a tactical environment, you have to trust your teammates to do their jobs, and they have to trust you to do yours. Vance earned your trust today through consistent performance and clear communication. That is how elite units function." "Question for the instructor," the Felnar spoke up. His name was Rax Teller, and he was one of the faster operators in the class. "Does this mean we should all be specializing instead of training as general infantry?" "No," I said firmly. "Specialists are force multipliers, but they only work when the base force is competent. If the assault teams had performed poorly today, Vance's shooting would not have mattered. You need riflemen, you need breachers, you need medics, you need leaders. Specialists enhance those capabilities, but they do not replace them. What you should take away from today is that diverse skill sets create tactical advantages. Find what you are good at, get better at it, and learn how to integrate that skill with your team." The briefing continued for another 30 minutes as we reviewed specific tactical decisions and discussed what could be improved. To their credit, the recruits asked good questions and seemed genuinely interested in learning rather than just defending their performances. When we finally dismissed them for lunch, most of the group clustered around Riley asking her questions about shooting, tactics, and equipment. She answered patiently, explaining concepts, and even offering to help some of them improve their marksmanship during free practice time. Krell walked over to where I was shutting down the monitoring systems. Well, that was educational. I think we might want to adjust the difficulty settings for future exercises. That was too easy with a dedicated sniper in play. Agreed, I said. But more importantly, I think we need to consider how we structure training going forward. Most galactic military forces use standardized approaches because that is what works for large-scale operations. But humans bring specialized skill sets that do not fit neatly into standard categories. You think there will be more like her? Krell asked. Absolutely. Humans have been fighting each other for their entire history. They have developed incredibly diverse combat methodologies. Snipers, like Vance, close quarters specialists, demolition experts, psychological warfare operators. If we are going to integrate humans into galactic defense forces effectively, we need to recognize and utilize those specializations. That sounds like a lot of extra work, Krell said with a sigh. It is. But it is worth it. Did you see how much the other recruits improved just by having her on Overwatch? They moved more confidently, they communicated better, they adapted faster. That is what good specialists do. They make everyone around them better. Over the next few weeks, the training continued with increasing complexity. Urban warfare gave way to wilderness survival scenarios. Those led to shipboarding actions. Then hostage rescue simulations. And in every single exercise, Riley found ways to contribute that went beyond just shooting. In the wilderness scenario, she taught several recruits how to read terrain and find concealed positions. During shipboarding, she identified structural weak points that could be exploited for tactical advantage. In hostage rescue, her patience and precision allowed assault teams to wait for perfect moments instead of rushing in and risking civilian casualties. But more than her technical skills, what impressed me most was how she integrated into the class. She never acted superior despite clearly being the best marksman. She helped others improve without being condescending. She took criticism when her tactical decisions were wrong and adapted quickly, and she built genuine friendships with recruits from multiple species. Jex became one of her closest allies in the class. The big Creolor had swallowed his pride and asked her to help him improve his long-range shooting. In return, he taught her some close-quarters combat techniques that his species had perfected over millennia. They made an odd pair, the massive blue warrior and the small human with her custom rifle, but they complemented each other perfectly. The Vexian twins started incorporating her sniper reports into their tactical planning, using her intelligence to set up ambushes and flanking maneuvers. Derek Holt basically became her assistant, carrying extra ammunition and helping her spot targets during exercises. Even Vex Carr, the cybernetic Morgath who initially resented her organic precision beating his computer-assisted aim, eventually asked to study her techniques to improve his own performance. On the final day of the qualification course, we ran the ultimate test, a combined arms exercise that required all 40 recruits to work together as a single cohesive unit against overwhelming simulated enemy forces. The scenario was brutal: 200 hostile combatants, armored vehicles, air support, the works. Historical completion rate for this exercise was about 40%, and even successful runs usually saw 30 to 40% casualties. I gave them 1 hour to plan their approach. No guidance from me or Krell, just the recruits, the tactical maps, and their combined experience. Jex took charge of the overall coordination, which everyone agreed made sense. But the first thing he did was ask Riley where she would position herself for maximum effect. "I need elevation and mobility," she said, studying the map. "But more importantly, I need target prioritization. What are the biggest threats?" "The armored vehicles," Jex said, immediately. "Our standard weapons can damage them, but it takes concentrated fire. If we spend too much time dealing with vehicles, the infantry will overwhelm us." Riley nodded. "What if I could disable the vehicles? Would that change your tactical approach?" "Disable them how?" "Your rifle fires chemical rounds. Those will not penetrate armor." "No, but they will penetrate vision ports, sensor arrays, and communication equipment. I cannot destroy the vehicles, but I can make them blind and deaf." "Would that help?" Jex's eyes went wide. So did mine, watching from the observation deck. That was brilliant. Tactical thinking. She was not trying to do the impossible. She was identifying how her specific capabilities could create advantages for the main force. That would help enormously, Jex said. If the vehicles are blind, we can avoid them or disable them with breaching charges at close range. Okay, new plan. Vance takes out vehicle systems in the opening phase. That buys us time to advance. We split into 3 groups. Alpha and Bravo hit from the west. Charlie and Delta hit from the east. Overwatch coordinates from central position and calls out priority targets as the battle develops. They spent the full hour refining the plan. Everyone contributed ideas. The Vulcan twins suggested using smoke grenades to obscure their advance. Derek Holt identified supply routes that could be cut to slow enemy reinforcements. Brax Teller proposed using his speed to scout ahead and provide early warning. It was beautiful to watch. 40 recruits from dozens of different species, working together, leveraging their unique strengths to create a plan that was greater than the sum of its parts. Exercise begins in 2 minutes, I announced. All personnel to start positions. Good luck. The battle that followed was intense, chaotic, violent, everything a final exam should be. But it was also coordinated. The recruits moved like they had been fighting together for years instead of weeks. They adapted to problems in real time. They covered each other. They communicated constantly. And Riley was everywhere. She started by systematically destroying the sensor systems on all 6 armored vehicles in the first 90 seconds of the fight. Then she shifted to eliminating high-value targets, enemy commanders, heavy weapons operators, anyone who posed a disproportionate threat to the assault teams. Her shot count for the exercise was 63, and her accuracy remained perfect. The recruits won, not just completed the scenario, but actually won with flying colors. Mission success in 42 minutes, total casualty rate of 12%, all primary objectives achieved and 2 bonus objectives completed that I had not even told them about. When the exercise ended and everyone returned to the briefing area, they were exhausted but elated. They had beaten the scenario that most classes failed. They had worked together across species and specialty barriers. They had proven they were ready for graduation. I stood before them one final time. I have been teaching this course for 15 cycles. I have trained thousands of recruits from hundreds of worlds. And I can honestly say that this class, your class, is one of the best I have ever seen. Not because any individual is the strongest or fastest or smartest, but because you learn to work together, you learn to respect each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. You learned what it means to be a team. I paused and looked at Riley specifically. Some of you came here expecting to prove individual superiority. You learned that real strength comes from cooperation, and you learned that lesson from someone many of you initially dismissed. Remember that humility. Remember that openness to being surprised, because the galaxy is vast, and there will always be someone who can teach you something new if you are willing to listen. Congratulations, I finished. You all graduate with honors. You are now qualified for assignment to active duty units throughout the Galactic Defense Initiative. Serve with pride, fight with courage, and never forget the lessons you learned here. The room erupted in cheers. Recruits hugged each other, celebrating across species barriers. Jex picked up Riley in a massive bear hug and spun her around while she laughed and told him to put her down before he broke something. The Vessian twins did some kind of coordinated dance. Derek Holt was crying, which apparently was a normal human emotional response to happiness and relief. After the celebration died down and most of the recruits had left to pack their gear for transfer, Riley approached me one last time. "Thank you, Instructor Nax," she said. "I learned a lot here, not just about tactics or working with other species, but about myself. You taught me a few things too," I admitted. "I have been doing this job for a long time and I thought I understood what made good soldiers. You reminded me that there are many paths to excellence, and that sometimes the unconventional approach is the best one." She smiled. "My grandfather used to say that the most dangerous person in any fight is the one everyone underestimates, not because they are secretly powerful, but because underestimating them is a strategic mistake that creates opportunities. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." "He was, taught me everything I know about shooting, hunting and life in general, died 3 years ago, but I think about his lessons every day." "Then he would be proud of you," I said. "You honored his teaching here." Riley nodded, blinking rapidly in that way humans do when they are trying not to cry. Then she straightened up. gave me a proper military salute, and walked away to join her classmates. Krell approached from behind. "So, what did you learn from all this?" I thought about the question carefully. I learned that humans are going to change everything about how we fight wars. They bring creativity, adaptability, and a willingness to master individual skills to levels we typically only see in species with natural advantages. And if one human with a custom rifle can make this much difference in a training scenario, imagine what they will do in actual combat when the stakes are real. Should we be worried? Rel asked. I mean, as a species, they are terrifyingly effective. No, I said. We should be grateful they are on our side. Because any enemy that underestimates humans is going to learn a very painful lesson. The same lesson this class learned, which is, never mock the rifle setup, never judge by appearances, and never ever assume you know what someone is capable of until you have seen them perform under pressure. Krell laughed. Only snipers, right? That is what you said when you figured out what she was. Only snipers take that kind of care with their weapons and their craft, I agreed. But humans, they take that sniper mentality and apply it to everything they do. That is what makes them special. That is what makes them dangerous, and that is why I am very glad Riley Vance and her people decided to join the galactic community instead of conquering it. We watched through the observation window as the recruits loaded onto transport shuttles for their various assignments. Riley's shuttle was heading to the 7th Fleet, where she would serve as a designated marksman for special operations teams. Jex was going to the 3rd Marines as an assault team leader. The Vexian twins were assigned to intelligence services. Derek Holt was joining a standard infantry unit. They would all serve well. They would all make their species proud, but they would also carry forward the lessons they had learned together about cooperation, about respect, about never underestimating others based on preconceptions, and somewhere on some battlefield in the future, an enemy was going to make the mistake of mocking a human with a strange-looking rifle. And that enemy was going to learn why humans, despite being physically weaker than many species, despite being technologically newer to the galactic stage, despite seeming unimpressive at first glance, had earned the reputation as some of the most dangerous soldiers in known space. Because humans do not just fight, they perfect the art of fighting. They turn warfare into a science, a craft, a calling, and they never ever stop learning and improving. As the last transport shuttle pulled away from the station, Krell turned to me with a question. What do you think the galaxy will look like in 10 years, with thousands of humans like Riley serving in defense forces across hundreds of worlds? I smiled. Safer, much safer. And any species, foolish enough to threaten the galactic peace, will discover that humanity's greatest weapon is not their technology or their numbers. It is their refusal to accept limitations, their creativity in solving problems, and their absolute dedication to mastering whatever challenge is placed before them. Only snipers, Krell said again, shaking his head in amazement. Only humans, I corrected. Only humans would take a primitive chemical propellant weapon, refine it to levels of precision that exceed advanced technology, and then use it to become the top graduate in a class of alien soldiers. That is humanity in a nutshell. Give them a challenge, and they will find a way to excel at it. Underestimate them, and they will prove you wrong in the most spectacular way possible. We stood there for a moment in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the observation window. Somewhere out there, Riley Vance was beginning her military career. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was about to learn what one determined human with a custom rifle and a point to prove could accomplish. And somewhere out there, I suspected, another instructor at another training facility was about to have the same experience I just had. The experience of watching their preconceptions shattered by a human who refused to conform to anyone's expectations except their own. The galaxy was changing. Humanity was here, and nothing would ever be quite the same again.